Yeah, these are kind of dark,
You're
right?
picking really dark ones.
Yeah, right.
But
That's a good point.
you won't mix white with everything.
No, there's no problem. Many of these pigments have white in them already. Okay, let's try a really weird pigment. This is Old Holland Red Gold Lake. Okay, and so I might just try a pigment like this just to see what it does. That's totally different from what I usually do. Okay, this is a lake. The question you just asked. A lake means that it's not that the pigment has no mass. It's a dye, and to make it into paint, they need an inert pigment that they dye with the other pigment. And so there's always two things in something which is called a lake, like alizarin crimson or rose madder. Those are all lakes. They're a dye which has been used to dye a colorless pigment, and they make the paint out of that. Okay, that's what lake means. It doesn't have anything to do with water or anything like that. Okay, so this is this color, but because it's a lake, and because it has no very, very weak mass tone, it'll be a completely different color if I mix it with white. Which I think I wrote some white. So let's see what happens there. See that? So we call this, every pigment has two qualities. One's called the undertone and the overtone, or we call it the mass tone or the tint. And you can see that these are very different. This is this brownish red mass tone, but its undertone is this yellow. See that? And it's a very particular yellow. It's different from a cadmium yellow or something like that. Played with it. You might get a color which is somewhat reminiscent of the full. Yeah, see?
Yeah.
Okay, so you see these are very close value relationships.
Yeah.
Are a little bit reminiscent of the fall because they're desaturated colors. You get that?
Mm-hmm.
By the way, the last lecture I gave, I made two huge mistakes. One is well, I talked too long, but that's always a mistake. But I talked so long that I didn't have time for a question and answer period, which was what everybody was more interested in. And there wasn't enough time for wine and cheese.
Oh.
So if any of you have any questions, I really would like actually right now to hear them. Is there anything that's about any of this that's confusing? Huh?
You've been asking questions all along.
Yeah, but maybe some people are shy. Anybody have any questions about, I mean, I know some of these concepts are, if you're not an artist, they might seem abstract. But they are actual practical problems.
Just a practical question, like you said, do you have any books or anything that if I was interested in looking more into this?
Yeah, and you know, people always ask me that. My students always ask me that, well, isn't there a book I can buy? And of course, as a teacher, one's first reaction is, no, you have to pay me to learn it from me. But it's all information which is universally accepted. In other words, it's all information that's out there. The trouble is that books about art, especially instructional books about art, you can be anybody and write a book about how to paint painting. You see what I'm saying? So what I'm saying is that, you know, unlike science, where you have the National Society in London, which conducts peer reviews, in science, if you publish a paper, everybody in the world reads the paper, and if they can find anything wrong with it, you're thrown out. You're disgraced. But in art, there's no peer review. So there are many, many books about color composition. You can go to a bookstore and look through them, and in every one of those books you will see paintings by the author, horrible color. Oh, horrible. I mean, frighteningly bad color. Kind of like interior decorators, you know? In other words, they think they have knowledge which is not based on science, which is not based on anything. It's based on erroneous information. And they have systems which they give you for deciding which colors to use. And it's awful. I mean, the results are horrible. But I mean, we know that. 90% of the people who paint, probably color is the worst thing that they do. I would say probably more than 90%. Why? Because they have no knowledge. I mean, it's not just because they have no knowledge, because they have a lot of bad information, because they've been given a lot of bad advice by a lot of books, by a lot of self-proclaimed experts on color who give you systems like formulas, and they all have this color wheel. The color wheel is completely erroneous. I mean, every physicist in the world goes, oh yeah, well, all those crazy artists use that color wheel. It doesn't mean anything, it doesn't make any sense, but their artists will just, well, anybody who works with color in any industry has to learn real facts. Because a television camera works in a certain way. A digital camera has, is that a digital camera? What makes it work? Art or science?
Science.
Science.
Photons.
It's that simple. Yeah.
I know that you use a variety of media and varnish for the different pictures, but the main media that you use for your oil paints and the main varnish?
I don't really use one more than another. I use several for different reasons. I use safflower oil when I want to be able to play with the paint for a long time because it takes months to dry. I mean, it's
Mixed with
terrible
turpentine.
dryer.
Mixed with turpentine, right?
Not necessarily mixed with turpentine. Sometimes mixed with odorless paint thinner. You can mix safflower oil with odorless paint thinner, but you can't mix oleoresins with it. You need turpentine. This is getting technical, but oleoresins need a stronger solvent than odorless paint thinner, which is a weaker solvent than turpentine. And so you really should use with Damar resin or mastic resins or anything like that. You really should use turpentine. But oils, straight oils, you can use an odorless paint thinner. So linseed oil or stand oil or safflower oil, you can use an odorless paint thinner. It's not as good.
Or linseed.
Or linseed oil, yeah. Didn't I say that?
Yeah. You did.
Yeah. But I also sometimes use certain alkyd mediums. I only use them when I want the paint to dry fast, which is rare, but if I have a show that's opening in a week and a half, then yeah, use that. So there are different reasons. I sometimes use Venice turpentine, which gives a very beautiful finish. It's not as powerful as the adhesive, but it has a wonderful quality to it. So I can't really say that I use one medium more than the other. I would say this. When I'm painting outside, I usually use my traditional medium, which is Damar resin and stand oil. Stand oil has leveling properties and also doesn't yellow because it's polymer. And inside, I don't use that anymore because I've developed a sensitivity to turpentine. I don't use large amounts of turpentine in summer studio, except in summer when everything's open. But
And the varnish?
The varnish, the varnish has even more powerful solvents in it. Varnishes, again, they're oleoresins. They have more powerful solvents, so I have to wear a mask and stuff like that.
Yeah, but Damar maybe is one of the better ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It turns yellow. It has problems, but I use Damar and wax, beeswax and Damar in varying proportions because I can control the amount of gloss on the picture pen. And as you know, wax makes it less glossy. So the bigger painting is, usually the madder I like the surface so that you can see the painting. Ideally, a really big painting, if I could, I would probably make it dead matte if I could, which is, of course, why acrylic paint became so popular in the 20th century, because of the scale. Because artists started working really big, they could use acrylic paint, they could make a perfectly dead matte surface, much easier to control the appearance of the picture. Any other questions about medium? Anything like that? The idea of doing this kind of thing is largely take something you can do in a short amount of time. And that's something I haven't talked about that much, but time is very, very important in painting. It's kind of the, to me, I've come to think that time is more important than color. Because the purpose of painting really is to combat time. I mean, when you think about it.
Yes.
So when you think about it, art is fighting against time.